the thing I think is really, one of the things I think is really good about the way Rebecca does these books and things is she's really, really got it down. I mean, if you want to participate in one of the chapters, she's really got it down. She knows how to get your name out there, to leverage that, to really work with Barnes & Noble to get it on. I mean, she's got it down. It's very visible. She knows how to get you on the bestseller list, the international, and I think now it's galactic next. I'm not sure. But there you go. I'll say galactic, extraterrestrial bestseller. So we're going to talk a little bit about the authors here. So we'll have Rebecca come up and do that. But I just want to let you know she has got it down. So let's give a hand for Rebecca.
So this next portion, we're going to get a deeper look at some of our authors and one of our powerful books. The Grandmother Legacies we released in December of last year. And this book started with what I thought was my book, my grandmother's stories, that I kind of launched my speaking career around, was sharing different stories from my grandmothers in this arena. And as I shared about my book and these stories, I had people come up to me saying, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that. And I thought, they're assuming they get to be a part of this book. And then, you know, when multiple people come to you and say something that's similar, sometimes it's an ending, you know, something to look at. And so I did, and when I felt in, I thought, oh, wouldn't that be amazing to bring multiple stories, multiple generations together from all different parts of the world, sharing their legacies. Wouldn't that be an incredible book? And I became really excited about it. And so it ended up being a really special project to lead. The stories in this book are transformational. When our publisher saw it, they said, where did you find these incredible authors? These stories are so deep, they're so powerful. This is going to be an incredible book. And it became, within 24 hours, #1 in multiple categories in multiple countries. And it's still, thank you, having this ripple effect and this powerful impact around the world. So it's been such an honor. I've been deeply blessed by being on this journey and getting to watch these stories grow and unfold. And we have granddaughters that are sharing about grandmothers. We have mothers that are sharing what their mother passed to them, and they're passing to future generations. All different parts of the world, different cultures, different communities. And we even have grandmothers that are telling their story and their legacy too. So really, really rich book. So we have a few of our authors here today that are going to take the stage and share from their heart. And we had allotted 2 minutes, and because we have a smaller group than we had originally planned on, I'm giving them 3 minutes-ish to really share. And I want them to share why they decided to be part of this book, what it has meant to them, and give you a little highlight of what you can look forward to in their beautiful chapter. Does that sound good? Okay, could I have my Grandmother Legacy authors come on up? So Nina, if I could have you come on up. Nina is sharing from a grandmother's perspective in such a powerful way. It was very inspiring. I love it how you're claiming your legacy and bringing that forward. You are a midlife coach that you help in so many different ways. You have so many skill sets, including she can do voiceovers. You can bring books into, so say the proper term, book, we were talking about this earlier.
I narrate audiobooks for Audible. So if you go to Audible and put in my name, you'll see that I have 26 books there. Yeah. And if you're writing a book, I'd love to narrate your book.
And chapters, if they wanted to do their ebook, I'm just thinking.
Absolutely.
Opportunity.
Chapters, yes.
So let's welcome Nina Price to the center of the stage. Woo! You're welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's always a pleasure to be here. And I've been having trouble figuring out which piece I want to read from my book, because I write about my own grandmother, whom I adored, who was my best friend till I was 8 years old. And then I talk about my own experience becoming a grandmother in my early 40s, and I was so horrified. And then, what does it feel like to be the grandmother of young adult women who really could give a whatever about their grandmother because they're busy doing their friends and stuff. So there are really 3 parts to my thing, and I'm going to read about becoming a grandmother because this was so horrifying to me, even though I'd love
Do you want me to hold?
What?
Can I hold her? Are you good?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay.
I do this all the time.
Professional.
Thank you, though. Becoming a grandmother just happens to you. There is nothing you do to make it happen. No planning, no strategizing, no elaborate tactics. You could even say it's done to you. You do nothing, and as a consequence of others' actions, choices, and behaviors, your identity changes. And like it or not, you change as a result. Babies are born every day to women of all ages, young girls, teenagers, young women in their 20s and 30s, even middle-aged women in their 40s and 50s before the door of their fertility shuts in their faces. And their mothers all get to become grandmothers. The mothers who've waited for years for the privilege, the ones who've almost given up hope, the ones who just couldn't wait, and even mothers like me who didn't even know what hit them, who felt they were too young and weren't even considering it. After all, some women our age were just having their first children. I felt as though I had utterly failed as a mother, becoming a grandmother at 42. I'm not sure why, but why I felt responsible for my daughter's choices. I had taught her everything I was supposed to, but it felt as though I hadn't. On a September afternoon at 1 o'clock, I arrived at a small hospital in another state and met my granddaughter 1 hour after she was born and completely fell in love with her. So that piece was originally written as a short story at the time that this was all happening that I called The Concept Sucks, because that's really about how I felt. If you read my chapter in the book, you'll hear about the really charming relationship I had with my own grandmother and the grandmother that I'm becoming now that I have adult grandchildren. Wow.
Thank you. And we have another grandmother, Sandra Edwards, who is sharing both from about your grandmother and from your perspective. So I love what you share.
I'm going to talk about my grandmother.
Okay.
I'm not a grandmother.
Oh, I am sorry.
Well,
She's a Grandmother Legacy author sharing about her grandmother. I'm creating stories for you.
Well, I felt like I needed to tell this story because who else is going to tell it? My mother's gone. Everybody's gone. Somebody's got to tell this story.
I love that. So let's welcome Sandra Edwards to the center of the stage. Woo! As she tells about her grandmother.
Yes, about my grandmother. My maternal grandmother. She came from Minnesota to North Dakota to homestead by herself. Wow. Yes, isn't that amazing? So I'm reading a little bit about the house that she had on her homestead. I know the house well, as we lived there a lot after our grandparents moved to Williston. It was very small, with a little food pantry and an iron cook stove with a reservoir for hot water. The cook stove was the only heat. Hard to think of that when it was winter. There was an upstairs room. The stairs were steep and the room was small with a slanted ceiling. The chimney of the stove was next to the stairs and went up through the room, providing the only heat. All of the children stayed in that little room. My sister, Gloria, and I stayed in the room too, and found it hard to imagine that Grandma's 5 children could live in that teeny space. We found their names carved in the chimney bricks, marking their childhood longings and dreams, so real to us. The house sat on the edge of the Badlands. There were no trees or shelter, just a teeny, uninsulated house standing there by itself, exposed to all kinds of extreme weather.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I felt like I was right there. Beautiful. Thank you. Oh, good. I'm ready. So we're bringing Trina back, Swerdlow, to the stage, and she has the beautiful artwork. And when we were talking about her writing her chapter, she started sending me articles about Grandma Rose and showed me this beautiful picture of this doll. And so she promised to bring it today. So this is Grandma Rose. And let's welcome Trina Swerdlow to the center of the stage. Dun-dun-dun.
Hello. So my chapter is called Childhood Safe Havens, Grandma Rose, and Expressive Art. So before I get to some highlights from my chapter, I want to share a little bit about this doll. I created this doll long after my grandmother had passed, but it took me years to understand how much of an impact she had on my life. And it wasn't until I was on a healing path that I really connected to how she impacted me deeply. And my Grandma Rose was my rock of my childhood. And not only did she nourish my soul, she nourished my belly too. The woman could cook matzo ball soup, beet borscht. People are resonating, yes. And every week, from scratch, cinnamon bread. Grandma was not worried about calories or gluten. So now I'm going to turn Grandma Rose over to Rebecca to hold while I read a few excerpts. I think she's going to be in good hands. Would someone get a picture of that for me? Oh my gosh. Okay. So I wrote, and this, I'm going to give you some excerpts, so I'm going to encourage you to read my chapter. I have a fond memory of Grandma Rose taking me in her arms, looking deeply into my eyes, and singing, Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. Can you tell she was an immigrant? Exactly. And so my rock literally was rocking me. In my chapter, I also share that her love literally saved my life in a childhood that included violence and sexual abuse. Sadly, I grew up in a dangerous home. However, creating art was my other safe haven. As a small child, I often disappeared into crayon and paper, imaginary worlds. My ability to create art helped me survive the brutal reality of my home life, and it gave me a sense of power. At 29, I reached out for help, and I stepped onto a healing path to address my childhood wounds that were wreaking havoc on my health. This life-changing healing work inspired me 15 years ago to leave the publishing world as an art director and designer to shine my legacy light onto others. Today, in my private practice as a certified clinical hypnotherapist, I offer stress management tools, and I help women take their bodies back. I also help them get to healthy levels of weight and let go of the addiction to sugar. And in addition, I teach assertiveness, how to say no so that our yeses are heartfelt. So in closing, I encourage each of you to courageously speak your truth, tell your stories. They might free someone else that needs to hear your words and needs to receive your light. So shine on.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I'll trade you.
Precious cargo. Thank you. And we have our amazing Kimi Avary back on stage. And you are sharing about your grandmother and her voracious curiosity. Yes. So please welcome Kimi Avary to the center of the stage.
The morning I found my grandmother, I'd been caregiving her, and I wrote a lot about this in the chapter. But I was sent to pick up her will. And on the will was a sticky note that said, "No funeral, but if you must, only invite my closest friends." Jim Avedizian and I, the gentleman who had known her for 50 years, who was handing her will over to me, we burst out laughing. Every single person she met thought that they were her closest friend. Granny Nanny, Nancy Collins. Nancy was the name that she chose for herself. She was born at Edna. Nancy, at 9 years old, was the name she wanted to be called. Very sassy. I was drawn to this chapter this opportunity to write about her, because she made such a strong impact on my life. And I realized that it impacted my coaching that I do. They did a 40-year-long study at UC Berkeley on the single most important factor for relationship longevity. It's a woman's ability to recover after an argument. That means we have to manage our energy. We have to be aware of how we're feeling. Happiness is an inside job, although every man I've ever spoken to thinks it's his job to make her happy. But happiness is that inside job, and I work with my ladies over and over on this, to how to find the happiness within them so that they can shine their light. And the thing is, quantum physics talks about what you think you create. There's actually nobody outside of you. My husband, for instance, is an entirely different person if I'm cranky or if I'm really loving. And I swear to God, he hasn't changed. It's me, and it has everything to do with me. So I have my grandmother and my great-aunt Charlotte. My great-aunt Charlotte hated the fact that I would call her great-aunt Charlotte, although she was my great-aunt, right? But she was beautiful and wonderful, and I loved her dearly. And as she got older, I would go visit her. And every time I showed up at her house, she would say, "You never visit me." Every time I'd call, she'd say, "You never call me." Now, remember I said earlier we're hardwired to look for the things that we don't like? So all the times that I hadn't called or visited, she was highlighting those moments instead of highlighting the fact that I was there. So, Granny Nanny, I'd show up at her house, and she would say, "Oh, darling, it's so wonderful to see you." Every single time. You'd call her on the phone and she'd say, "Oh, darling, it's so wonderful to hear from you." My friends visited her. My friends' friends visited her. Everybody visited Granny Nanny and when I wrote this chapter on Facebook and I posted it about it, all my friends were going, "Oh, I loved her too. Oh, I loved her too." I know that. We had hundreds of people show up for her funeral. So I invite you to be voraciously curious and open and interested and welcoming to the people in your life, because that is a magnet to draw the kind of life you want to live. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Oh.
And Rebecca reminds me of my grandmother.
Thank you. What an honor. Thank you. Aren't they amazing? I hope you connect with them, get them to sign your book, learn a little bit more about the beautiful legacy that they are bringing forward and sharing with the world. Again, such an honor to be the leader of this and bringing it forward, and them sharing such rich, amazing legacy stories. So let's give them one more round of applause.